I call Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I'm pleased to rise on behalf of New Zealand First to take a reasonably short call on this first reading of the Food Safety Law Reform Bill. Mr Speaker, New Zealand First will support this bill to the Select Committee, and I stress that's only to the Select Committee at this stage. We supported the Food Act, obviously, which this bill will amend, along with, of course, the Wine Act 2003 and the Animal Products Act 1999. And I agree wholeheartedly with comments from the Chair of the Primary Production Committee, Mr McKelvey, on the importance of the sector to the economy overall in terms of the percentage of GDP that it creates, in terms of the number of people who are employed there. We're fully cognisant of the importance of that sector, Mr Speaker. And we support the stated aim of the bill, giving life as it does to the recommendations of the independent government inquiry into the whey protein concentrate contamination incident. This inquiry, of course, didn't report in time for its recommendations to be digested as such and included in the food bill as it was then. And we accept that some of those recommendations will require statutory changes to legislation in order to be implemented. But we're mindful, Mr Speaker, of the possibility of fishhooks being included in the fine print of changes that are made to laws which in other regards are honest enough in intent and construction. Quite possibly, Mr O'Connor. The explanatory note states, and I quote, that the fundamental model of the current system is not being changed. Well, we hope not, Mr Speaker, and it is in the Select Committee process that will show us whether in fact that remains the case. Reading from the debate pack that's been put together by the Library, Mr Speaker, and I have to say it's a very valuable and much appreciated resource, we see the key features of the bill: new requirements for risk-based plans and programs. Well, as I recall, Mr Speaker, it was these requirements that were at the heart of many of the submissions on the food bill, and there was a good deal of debate around them, the detail at that time. Second point is, we certainly hope that there will not be any great deviation from the consensus that was arrived at with regards to that position. Traceability and recall regulations. This sort of rather vaguely suggests that new regulations will set new traceability and recall requirements. Well, Mr Speaker, that could cover a very wide range of parameters, and again, we'll want to be certain that in fact the spirit of the Act as it exists will remain intact. Stronger verification. This seems unlikely to present any gnarly issues, Mr Speaker, but again our continued support will be dependent on that being the case. Stronger enforcement is the fourth point. Mr Speaker, stronger enforcement is generally something that New Zealand First is wholeheartedly in support of, as you will know from our stand on law and order. Provided, of course, that the stronger enforcement is not of laws and regulations that shouldn't exist in the first place. So, once again, we will be examining the detail behind this with quite some close scrutiny in the Select Committee. It's not that we don't trust the government, Mr Speaker. We do. rather, we're somewhat gun-shy when we read comforting phrases such as, again, from the bill's explanatory note. The bill also improves the statutory powers available for responses to food safety incidents by enhancing the Director-General's ability to, when there is a serious risk to public health, require relevant information from persons who hold it. Improves statutory powers and enhances the Director-General's ability. That could cover, again, a fairly wide range of activities, Mr Speaker, and also from the regulatory impact statement, provide a regulation-making power in the 3 Food Safety Acts to set requirements for operators to undertake mock traceability and recall exercises. When we hear those comforting noises couched in the terms that they are, Mr Speaker, again, we're not cynical, but we naturally wonder whether such provisions may contain the potential for a draconian approach to be taken by regulators in the absence or the failure of any suitably resourced and committed regulatory watchdog. And so we'll once again be very interested in examining in detail these provisions in the proper environment of the Select Committee. And of course reading and listening with great interest to the submissions of stakeholders from within the industry and of course the wider general public. And then of course, as my colleague from the Greens touched on, there is the matter of country of origin labelling, which doesn't fall under the purview of this reform bill, but which it could be argued could and should be very much within its scope. And we will argue that point, Mr Speaker, as I'm sure other parties from this side of the House will be doing, because country of origin labelling is very certainly very much a food safety issue. In spite of any protestations to the contrary, howls of outrage from the government benches, Mr Speaker, this view is not about xenophobia or prejudice or any other supposed crimes against political correctness. It's about caution, it's about due diligence and the simple common sense acceptance that there are some places in this world, there are some countries where standards are not what we would demand or expect, and where practices are less stringent and less safety oriented, and where life is perhaps cheaper than the value that we ascribe it here. So food from some parts of the world is not as safe as we would prefer, Mr Speaker, and labelling food that comes from those places as being identifiably from those places is something that a great many people in this country regard as being very important. And indeed, many people from within the primary sector and the food production sector do share those concerns.
I'm sorry to interrupt the honourable member. The time has come for me to leave the chair. Members, this debate is interrupted and set down for resumption next sitting day, and the House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow. Good evening.